thrilled to bring in the one and only sharpshooter, Tim Legler of ESPN, to the show today. Tim, thanks for joining us on the Pure Hoops podcast.
It is my pleasure. I'm really, really honored to be here today.
So in terms of contrast, before the stoppage to now, what team looks the most different in terms of style, strategy from when we shut down in March to present day now as we head into the playoffs?
Well, I think for me, you'd probably start with Portland. And this was a team that we looked at coming into this and said, man, this could be a dangerous situation. You're talking about a conference finalist team. You're talking about a team that's got a top 10 player in the league in Damian Lillard, one of the best backcourts in the NBA, and getting two bigs back that they did not have in Nurkic and Collins. So you looked at them and said, okay, they were a team that you didn't give much consideration to during the regular season. They were an afterthought, in a lot of ways, a disappointing season. And now they've played themselves into a situation now where they're most likely going to get a play-in situation where they're actually hosting as an 8 seed, which is crazy. You never would have thought that was possible when they headed down there. And not only that, you now look at them and a guy this hot and a team this hot going into a first-round playoff with the Lakers, and you go, not that you would pick Portland to win it, but the way the Lakers have looked offensively, contrasted with Portland, you now look at the Portland Trailblazers and say, this is a team now that is really dangerous. Whereas you didn't even consider the Blazers. I barely talked about Portland all season. And now you're finding a situation where you have the numbers that Damian's putting up, the way they're playing, and now you potentially get this first-round matchup with the Lakers where all eyes are going to be glued on it. I think I'd probably put them at the top of the list. I think for the most part, it's kind of status quo at the top, especially the East. Milwaukee, Toronto, Boston, I thought were the three teams that had a legitimate shot. I haven't changed at all in that. So I think they're still there. And then for the top of the West, we expect the Lakers and Clippers to be there in the conference finals. I don't think I've seen anything down there to make me change my mind on that either. But I think a team like Portland has made it a lot more interesting, the way that Damian Lillard has played. I think now they're worthy of being in this conversation with the drama heading into that first playoff round.
Yeah, and one more thing, BJ, just on Portland, I think their depth, Tim, is really underrated. And what they've been getting out of Gary Trent, what they've been getting out of Hazonia, they can bring Whiteside off the bench. I've been saying for 2 weeks the Lakers better be very careful, combine that with how they've looked. The Laker backcourt, how do they go about guarding Dame, CJ, Melo's at the 3 when they go big? I mean, these are potentially very dangerous matchups for the Lakers, and I know I'd be concerned. What are your thoughts just matchup-wise between the teams?
I think you hit it on the head with the Lakers because you think about who are the two guys that would have had primary responsibility for guarding Damian Lillard. Rajon Rondo, who's going to be out until deeper into the postseason, and Avery Bradley, who's not there. I mean, those are the two guys you would have been counting on to try to get into him a little bit. And all you want to do with a guy like Lillard, you're not going to completely stop him. You just want to make him less efficient by wearing him down a little bit and making him feel contact and picking him up a little bit earlier over half court and just making him work harder.
These are neutral sites. How do you think that's going to affect the coaching and what's that going to look like? Because, normally the role players play better at home than they do on the road. What do you think that's going to look like now that they're all just neutral games? There is no home court advantage. How do you think that's going to play itself out?
Yeah, so BJ, I think there are three critical factors that are going to determine who's going to be the last team standing. And you're going to be some upsets in the first round. I'm convinced there's going to be a couple of teams that are going to win. We don't expect to because of how unique this situation is. But here are the factors for me. First is leadership of your top guys. When you don't have the adrenaline that you get and the energy you get from running out of that tunnel onto your home court and then what that feels like in a playoff game, that's got to come from the top. So it's got to be the leadership and the communication of your top guys. And does everybody feel connected to them and you want to rally around them? That's going to be important. I think your depth is going to be critical because I think on given nights, it's going to be different guys that you might need to step up and give you that unexpected boost. But then I think the number one factor, and this is why I look at some teams like Miami, Dallas. They've got coaches that have won championships, Toronto. I think coaching is actually going to be more important in this environment than it even is in a normal playoff game for what you just said. When you're down 8 in a playoff game at home and going into the fourth quarter, well, I got news for you. It's going to be deafening when you break the huddle to walk onto the court And you know what that's going to do? That crowd is going to create such an energy level defensively that coaching, in large part, at that point, X's and O's are out the window. And these guys are going to derive that energy and to string together stops. And a lot of that's going to be generated from the crowd and the fans. Well, that's gone. So now for me, it's more of a premium on adjustments, matchups, hitting the right button with your substitution, late game play calling. I think coaching is more at a premium in getting through these playoff rounds than it even would be at home, because there is no external force that you can count on to help your team in a tough moment. It's going to be your top guys' leadership and your ability to push the right buttons to get them through a tough time, because they're not going to get that from anywhere else. So I think coaching is a major factor, and that's why the guys I mentioned that have won championships, a team like Miami is not favored to win it, but watch out for the Heat. You got an Eric Spoelstra over there. That's a dangerous team. Rick Carlisle has won a championship in this league, and he's got one of the best players in the NBA on his roster. I wouldn't want to play Luka Doncic in a 7-game series when you don't have that external factor of home court advantage. So I think it's something to really watch for, and I think we're gonna find out a lot about guys, I think good and bad, for some of these teams with the coaching decisions going forward. And some guys, I think it might cost them their job depending on how they handle this when they get into the postseason.
We hope you listen to the full conversation with Tim Legler. Check out the Pure Hoops podcast each and every Friday from Pure Hoops Media. Stay pure.